Hi everyone, my name is Sally. I'm the creative director here at Ossic Studios. That's actually like on my slides as well, so I might as well just start my presentation now and actually tell you about what I'm going to tell you about. My name is Sal. I like to go by Sal, and as I said before, I'm the creative director here at Ossic. I'm a fresh Australian implant as well. I've only been here for about a month or so. That's why I sound kind of weird. I used Unity and Fmod like quite a lot, and I've even worked for Fmod back in the past as well. I've done heaps of work with like different VR games too, so I just came from a game developer back home in Australia. I like to think of myself as both an educator and an evangelist about audio in games and audio in VR, and a bunch of other stuff as well. I also ramble on about diversity issues in games and all sorts of other stuff like VR. I just sort of like pick a topic and then throw a party with some slides and emoticons and all sorts of things. I like to think of myself as educated as well, because I'm just a little bit narcissistic, just enough to make it entertaining. I have a master's degree in acoustics with a specialization in psychoacoustics, and I also have a bachelor's degree in sound recording with honors as well. So I've really spent my time to try and research all this kind of stuff, so that when I do say it, it kind of is sort of accurate. So I hope that you kind of learn a little bit, even just a little bit. I'll be super happy about that. I also tend to talk about this VR audio stuff quite a lot. So maybe you should just trust me. And here's like a bunch of different logos about like all the different places that I talk about either audio for games or audio for VR. So I just recently came from speaking at SVVR, that conference, and GDC. But I've also spoken at like GCAP, which is the Game Connect Asia Pacific conference. I've spoken in Sweden and in the States a couple of times as well. Hopefully more in the future. So this is going to be a really detailed presentation, and it's going to be presented in a total blink of an eye. We're going to talk about why and how audio can be the next playground in your VR games. So you have to actually keep your eyes open for quite a lot. Only short blinks allowed. Otherwise you might actually miss something. And that's you right now. Your desire to know more intensifies. And you have to pull that face, otherwise I think you won't be interested. So we'll start out with the why. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the actual challenges in VR according to me. Ooh, I thought there was someone else like posing a question. It's okay. It's okay. They're not your run-of-the-mill challenges, and it's because VR is sort of like a bit of a new thing that's going on now. We've had VR for about a year now, and many of us have been experimenting and developing with it for maybe a few years beyond that if you were super duper lucky to get some of the original Oculus DK1s. When it comes to player or viewer presence and immersion, I identified two major woes or design faults that are really holding us back creatively, and that's both as total like sound as well as total like VR and just games in general or experiences. So the first one are the immersion breakers. So things that remind us we're actually wearing a headset and not just like flying around in a spaceship or like being a ghost and pulling yourself across beautiful landscapes or looking at a whale really. You don't want to break immersion because that actually sort of like halts the player's experience and sort of like pulls them totally out of whatever you're trying to like convince them that they are. The second thing is overstimulation. So things that are poorly designed and perceptually messy that kind of just make the player or the viewer go, ah, what is going on? It's just a mess of sound or lights, and I'll go into this in more detail later. You really don't want to overstimulate the player because it sort of just turns into like stimulus sludge where people just kind of want to take the headset off and the headphones off and just go, no, oh god, that was so bad. But they might not actually know why they felt it was bad. They might just think that VR is not for them, which we also don't want. So here's a montage of evidence. I've actually gone through and in some of the research that I've done just reading about VR, this is all from major publications, so things like CNET, Polygon, the Wall Street Journal. These are actually from around when the Oculus Rift was launched, but you'll see comments here that come through and they kind of like, they speak to what I really believe, and they'll speak to how I think we can solve these problems a little bit more in the future as well. So things that like, when you're tethered, it's a gentle reminder you've never really left. Having to turn left instead of right or vice versa to untangle the cable in VR, that's another big one where you feel like you have to do this, like a little dog or something. I don't know, it seems weird. Stepping on the cable as well, that's going to be a hazard. And many games would have been nearly as fun on a big TV with surround sound, which would be like the ultimate insult, really, in my books. So developers also inspired ire by putting interesting noise-making things near the player that they couldn't actually interact with. That's such a big no-no, it's not funny. Things like Arizona Sunshine have done that, where I think it's the original, like the campsite that you launch into. You can hear like a barbecue sizzling and you can actually see it. You can go over there, but you can't actually like do anything with these barbecue but it kind of has all the utensils there, and it sounds interesting, so maybe you would try and do that, which is really sad because, I don't know, why would you do that to a player? Give them something cool that they could do that before the zombies come, and then don't let them do it. It's such a travesty. So understanding the core of all this feedback and what needs to happen next in design is hard. But we as humans have been trying to figure out how to solve media problems like this for a while, so let's just keep trying. To help you mentally prepare for what you will learn today or tonight, a quote from the Nobel Prize-winning George Bexby. George's research helped pioneer the field of psychoacoustics, which helps us understand how people perceive and hear sound. VR is one of the first times that we've been really able to directly take learnings from this field to help inform our design practices for consumer experiences. But how, as it says here, the purpose of the ears is to point the eyes. How do you use ears to point eyes? That sounds super weird, but there's actually a few things that you can do to help your ears, like actually direct and point your eyes around, or the eyes of a player, or a watcher, or a visitor, whatever you want to call them in your experience. So number 2, the what? Sound for VR, what makes it special, according to me? So VR audio requires a few basic considerations. The first one is what tech am I using to deliver? The second one, which we'll go into later, is what makes sound and how important is it. So we're going to talk about the tech first. VR audio tech is just as important as the fact that you are deploying to a headset instead of a standard screen. I'll say that again. VR audio tech is just as important as the fact that you are using a headset instead of a standard screen to convey whatever your experience is to the player. Should I say it a third time, or is it sunk in yet? VR audio tech is really important. Good. So it should be part of your design from the outset, because you don't really design a game on like a standard screen like this and then like right at the end go, oh, I think I'll just make it VR. Some people do that. It doesn't always work out well. So we're not going to do that with audio either, are we? So what does all this VR audio tech stuff do? So tech stuff like Ossic, the Facebook 360 Spatial Workstation, the Oculus Spatializer, Real Space 3D, Rondo 360, there's so many of them that I didn't even list them all on the slide because it wasn't aesthetically pleasing to me, emulate the way that humans hear. So they apply extra processing to sound sources individually to place them in your game worlds, because I'm specifically talking about interactive VR here. And they give you height and depth well beyond any standard stereo playback. A common example of this type of technology from like ages ago is the virtual barbershop video on YouTube. That doesn't actually play anything, that's just what you'll see if you do a Google, so you should definitely do a Google if you don't know what that is about yet. You get a haircut in VR audio. It's kind of cool, but also kind of novel. The more tech you use to gather information about the listener, the more accurate the imaging is. So software that plugs in and just works is taking a lot of shortcuts to make it so simple. Software that is informed by hardware sensors is a lot more effective and accurate, but takes a little bit more work to get there because there's also like other magic that's going on. So what does all this stuff do, and why should I go to all this extra effort? Standard headphone panning is pretty good at giving you just left and right. Binaural spatialization tech just uses that left and right to deliver sound in a full 360 degree range that your VR visuals actually exist in. But why would you use extra tech? That sounds like it's extra work and nobody has any time or money. But if you remember from like 5 seconds ago, we spoke about how this tech can unlock like the 250 degrees outside of the standard field of view to give to players like front, back, and elevation as well. That sounds like it's more immersive. Whoa, that sounds like a better product overall. It actually sounds like you get a better product if you do more work. So here's where my value proposition comes in. Because once you actually have all this hardware and software lined up, maybe you could put your sound sources in the rest of your shiny new space. Well, by some sort of magic, and it is magic indeed, people still don't understand this, especially if they're not from games. When you design 3D worlds in Unity or Unreal or any of those things, those sound sources just totally exist in the 3D worlds. Like you can attach the sound to the visual object, and if the visual object has legs and moves around, then the sound follows it. It's truly magic. That's the awesome thing about working on VR games. We already have 360 degree rendering engines, so we might as well actually like use software and hardware that supports that. The VR headset is part of that, but now we should also think about the rest of the pipeline as well. Whether that's the Oculus Rift or the Ossic headphones, whatever actually like floats your boat. What you might be thinking now is how you can start planning to make excellent use of your new space and get this sort of effect so that you avoid one of the challenges that we've covered before, overstimulation. Does make more sense. So, part 3, the plan, because I'm going to teach you now how to basically, like all these steps, I'm conning you into making like a game audio design document, and then like whenever you decide to have a sound designer on your team, they'll be so happy it's not funny, so you should just do this. Just do this. So audio design planning 101 according to me. And this is where we address the what makes sound and how important is it part. So, step 1. This is the most important part. You just need to decide what makes sound. It's very difficult. What we have here, this is a really hard step. What else? Grab a piece of paper or a spreadsheet if you're more organized, and then just start listing in everything in your game that makes sound. This is like a really exploratory, like, one of those mind mappy sort of times where you just get to like write everything down and everything's a good idea. So here's an example. This is only part of a larger spreadsheet that had many, many tabs because I'm a total control freak and also I forget everything, so I have to write it down. But what you can see is that I've started listing out all the things, well, some of the things that were in my game, and I actually listed out what category of event they sort of like fall under as well. So here we've got a zombie ambience, and that's an environment. Fair enough. A flare, like one of those like sizzly hot things that makes light so people can rescue you. That's an environment as well because you couldn't interact with it, so I had to make sure it wasn't too interesting, otherwise people would be like, "Meh, why can't I pick this up?" And then I would be breaking my own rules, that's all bad. And it goes down to, I've got props here as well, so things that people actually do interact with, like a helicopter. You don't really interact with it, it just interacts with you. Elevator doors, radars, generators, all sorts of stuff. So this is like step 1. Just list everything, put categories against it. It's very helpful. You can also use it to track the assets as you grow your audio design as well. So it's making sure you don't forget anything, and then like the day before release you go, "Oh shit, damn it, why did I forget that? That is really dumb." And now the helicopter doesn't have any sound. That would be really bad. So bad. So decide when all of those things that you put in your list, when they make the sound. All those things aren't going to make sound all the time. That's obnoxious, like when there's just too many flashy lights in a dance club. It's just bad design and it makes everyone feel gross. Like how this is going to make everyone feel gross for the entire time it's up on the screen. So to make sure the player can understand what's happening around them and knows what to react to in VR, they need to hear the right thing at the right time. Would you believe? So here's another example where we have some VO class sounds from the same game, actually. And we especially want to make sure that because it's VO, we're delivering the information at the right time to the player. So it's a really good exercise in thinking about what we want the player's behavior to be before we design the whole game, or during when we're designing the whole game as well, because VO never happens early enough, even if you try. So here we've got lifts, pick up weapons, player, we want to neg the player sometimes to tell them they're doing a bad job and they should try harder, or we want to support them sometimes if they're doing a really good job. Repair the barriers and repair the radar. All under the category of VO. This actually just says served and it's green because I finished it. Yeah. But on the far right hand side is where the important information for this particular slide is. So play if no players have used the elevator for 30 seconds. Play if no players have collected new weapons for 30 seconds. So with this VO, we're just trying to remind the players to do things. In the whole grand scheme of things, it was pretty unimportant VO. And there was a whole bunch of other logic that was sitting above it, like actually telling them to go to the helicopter, or to pay attention to the helicopter, or go to the helicopter or you'll lose the game, go to the helicopter or you'll die, please go there, oh god, you're going to have a terrible time and tell us that our game sucks if you don't go to the helicopter right now, all those sorts of lines. But we're also just making sure that we decide when we want to have all this sound trigger. This is just a VO example, but you essentially do the same thing with any type of sound you throw in a game. So, there's a few more things that you can use to design these behaviors. So you can start by thinking about what events trigger sounds, and that example that we had just before was one of those examples. So things like an explosion, perhaps. It's a very small one. You can also imagine the radius that the player will hear that sound in. So how far away they need to be before they don't hear it at all, or how close, how loud it will be when they're very, very close to it. You can also think about what direction you can hear that sound in. Because, you are kind of, trying to use those ears and those sounds to point the player's eyes in a direction. So maybe the explosion is very small, so that it attracts attention and makes a player walk in that direction, as opposed to just making them feel like they've been radiated by a nuclear bomb and then they're dead. So different types of sounds, different types of purposes. And then the third step is deciding how important that sound is to the player as well. So you can take your list of sounds and their behaviors and when they start triggering and all that kind of stuff, and start by doing a simple prioritization of your list. And this is actually really important. It's not something that you should skip out on because it sounds kind of boring. It's actually a chance to avoid overstimulating the player. And it's like to really seriously guide the players as to what to look at and what to do next. So prioritization of your sound list is where you start on your journey of determining how important the sounds are to your player. Prioritization allows you to declutter and create organization and structure in your sound worlds, so that you just don't end up with like sonic sludge that makes everyone feel like they're just going to rip the headphones off and play just listening to their Spotify playlist. So here we go. A simple way to think about it is to think about which sounds are super important, and which sounds are really not, just generally speaking. The super important ones should be prioritized over the not so important sounds. So like in an interactive example, we're using things like important story elements, dangerous things that might eat the player, core game mechanics that are important for them to enjoy their experience, critical VO, so stuff that they really need to hear, otherwise they're going to screw up the game, and UI feedback sounds as well to help them get the information that they need from the game, if you have any UI sounds at all. Then the stuff you're going to deprioritize are things like environment sounds, so stuff that's just happening around that's not really super important so that the player wins the game. Scene setters as well, it's kind of like a subset of environment sounds. Any sort of novel props, so stuff that looks cool and like you really liked because, you know, that flare made a little shh sound and you kind of liked that. Like, it's still not very important because unless the player's actually going to interact with that and it's important in the game at some point, you're not going to like do anything with that sound. And also simple interaction sounds and non-critical VO. They all get completely shafted. They get culled. They get turned down. They get thrown to the wayside and made to feel like totally like insignificant citizens compared to the super important sounds, because those are the ones that actually help your player feel like they've won the game and that they love you and that they'll buy your next game as well. So really, what you're doing is integrating your audio planning into your game experience design. In practice, on the simplest level, you want to make sure that those super important sounds are heard above and beyond the not so super important sounds. That's what I said just before, but it's really useful to reiterate that. So perhaps it's like the helicopter that's coming to save our player from the zombies, right? Yeah, that one. Even like this one might be more important before the helicopter arrives, but if the helicopters are arriving at the end of the game, this one can, yes, thank you. I didn't know I was being timed, you didn't tell me that. So once you've decided all these priorities and stuff, you'll also want to be placing these sounds on your level maps, in your player stories, even in your narrative scripts, or to make sure that you're creating a rich audio design that takes advantage of the 3D audio and VR tech that you're using in development. So this is where you do all of your doing. So there's a lot that can crowd your audio design, and if you've done what I usually do and just like vomit out ideas about how all the cool sounds you could put in something, you're probably going to end up with like at the start like a mix that's so messy and cluttered that it's like sonic sludge, and you go, oh no, I've got so much work to do, and then you get really excited because you have a lot of work to do. So, but you don't want to like overstimulate and confuse the player, and that should be your top priority to avoid those things. So there's definitely a few simple techniques that you can iterate on to help achieve a clean, effective, immersive mix. And here's a list of them. So, taking advantage of surround sound environment beds, or even just using quad or stereo, so like environment beds as well, just to really make sure that you're not spatializing everything that's not important, and you're saving on like the processing power of your computer or whatever's running your VR experience. So setting the minimum and maximum audible distance, so how loud something is going to be when the player is close to it, and when they can stop hearing it as well because they're too far away. Using triggering zones to start and stop sounds at the right time, capitals, right time, as well, so that they only hear the right sounds when they're in a room or space. Using snapshots, that's a Unity and Fmod feature, to manage the mix and effects throughout the game. Snapshots are basically just a temporary mixer state where you can like do simple things like turning things up or down if a particular set of circumstances are met. They're actually really useful for like creating, you know when you're like playing Call of Duty and you get shot up a bunch like I always do, and then you're just about to die and the heartbeat's like, and everything's like really muddy and stuff, that's a temporary mixer state because they're turning up some sounds and affecting others. So using sound grouping and sound volume ducking as well to make sure you're really moving out some of those unimportant sounds out of the way. Making sure the right volume attenuation curve is used so that things get quiet at the right rate. Might even have to design your own, which is part of the fun. Making sure that the appropriate sounds are spatialized because not everything needs to be spatialized at the same time. It can also really tax your computer's processing power and make players that are playing on maybe like lower end machines or on mobile feel like they're playing the worst game ever and they want to like lean over and vomit, which is not good. We don't want that. And also giving sounds different EQ settings if they're not critical. So really helping the sounds that are most important have the most sparkle and crack if they need to. And since you have such a great plan and brief now, get a sound designer as well. So here's the most summarized summary I could possibly think of. So VR is far from perfect. It's a great starting medium and has given us a lot of license to start exploring our creative genesis with these new realities. It's pretty clear that VR can use a lot of help from some more traditional media like games to help augment that immersion level that's being slapped on a viewer's face. Audio is one of those magical things that our brains can process a whole sphere of data almost instantly and understand what is happening around them to make sure that they can jump out of the way of those tigers that are behind you. You can also have access to tech that allows you to take advantage of the history of research into psychoacoustics as well, so you might as well just do it. And actually thinking about and putting some effort into designing the audio in your experiences will truly, truly, truly augment the immersive potential of your experiences and help you rise above the simple challenges that we covered earlier in the piece. And there's lots of things you can try and lots of sound designers you can work with as well, even in San Diego. I didn't know that before. So before I let you all near the keg again, which it was there but they moved it, I want to come back to this quote. This quote informs me in everything that I do and every conversation that I have with people who don't know what you can do with audio yet. Our perception of the world is so automatic, like the way that we hear and see, that it's hard to cognizantly design for perceptual mediums like sound. Because sound is invisible, it's intangible, you can't touch it, you can't see it, you can't even taste it. It's so strange. But I really believe in all of you to do the right thing so that you can use those ears to point the eyes in your VR experiences. So, you can add me on Twitter, you can come say hi, I only buy cake or pizza. And if you're a cake and if you don't want to get bitten, then you can also email me at sally@ossic.com. That's the end of my presentation.